What if I told you the perfect Mercedes isn't the one with the loudest exhaust, or the most aggressive body kit, or the most aftermarket badges slapped on it? What if the best version of your Mercedes was hiding underneath everything it already is? What if perfection was just refinement? Car modification is all about personal expression. There are so many ways to make your car your own. But today I want to show you an approach that I've genuinely fallen in love with over the years. The OEM Plus philosophy. And honestly, for a Mercedes, it just makes sense in a way it doesn't for almost any other brand. See this car? Most people will drive right past it. But those who know, they know. They notice the stance, the presence, the way it sits, the way it moves. It's not screaming for attention, but it commands it. If you're looking to build a Mercedes that's refined, capable, and sorted, something that feels like it rolled out of a Falterbach on a good day, but without turning it into a caricature of itself, this might be exactly what you've been looking for. But first, this video is specifically about street cars and daily drivers. If you're building a show car or going full AMG track weapon, you already know what you're doing. This is for everyone driving their C-Class, E-Class, S-Class, or CLA every single day who wants something a little more special. And look, I made a video a while back about why you shouldn't modify your Mercedes like it's a race car. Some people in the comments thought I was completely against modifying Mercedes at all. That couldn't be further from the truth. Go check that out first if you haven't, because what I'm about to show you is the answer to that video. So what exactly is OEM Plus? Imagine taking everything great about your Mercedes, the build quality, the engineering, that feeling of effortless authority, and just making it better. Not louder, not lower to the point of scraping every driveway. Better. It's about thoughtful upgrades that enhance the driving experience while maintaining the reliability and usability that made you want a Mercedes in the first place. The factory engineers did an incredible job, but they made compromises. They tuned for broad markets. They tuned for comfort over feel, isolation over connection. OEM Plus strips away those compromises and finishes the car into what it should have been if it was designed specifically for an enthusiast. The best OEM Plus Mercedes builds are the ones that make people stop and ask, "Is that the AMG version?" And you just smile. I always find inspiration in cars like the E53 AMG. Not the full-blown E63, but that perfect balance of performance and everyday usability. Or the older E55 AMG W211. To most people, it looks like a completely normal E-Class sedan, but everything about it is just right. Or look at the C63 W204. Understated, immensely capable, absolutely livable every day. That car is basically a factory OEM Plus build, and it's one of the best road cars ever made in my opinion. These are the cars I look at and ask myself, can I shape my own Mercedes into something like this? And the answer is yes. Let's start with wheels and tires, because this is where the visual transformation begins. And Mercedes, more than almost any other brand, nails its OEM wheel designs. The problem is the aftermarket tends to either copy them poorly or go in a completely different direction. Here's my approach. Go to wheel-size.com, select your make and model, and look at the biggest and widest factory option available for your platform. On a W205 C-Class, the base car might come on 17-inch wheels, but the AMG line or C43 came on 18-inch or 19-inch wheels. Same platform, wider rubber, better fitment. That's your target. If you want to stay OEM style, genuine used AMG wheels sourced from a breaker for your specific chassis are peak OEM Plus. They fit perfectly because they were designed for the car. They look factory, and they're often genuinely beautiful designs. The AMG cross-spoke styles, the turbine wheels from the W212 era, the forged monoblock wheels from the C63. These are timeless. If you go aftermarket, match the weight or go lighter. Mercedes OEM wheels are often heavy, so there's real room to save unsprung mass with a quality forged wheel. But do not put heavy replica wheels on your Mercedes and think you've improved anything. You've made it worse, and it looks worse. One thing specific to Mercedes, many models have staggered fitments from the factory, wider in the rear than the front. Respect that. The engineers chose it for balance and handling. Going square when the car was designed for stagger will change how the car rotates, and not necessarily for the better. And tires, do not cheap out here. Get a quality performance street tire. Michelin Pilot Sport, Continental Sport Contact, Bridgestone Potenza. These are the tires that will actually let the chassis do what it was designed to do. Semi-slicks on a daily Mercedes is a bad idea. Cold weather performance is poor, they need heat to work properly, and you'll be spinning in a car park in November wondering what happened. Suspension is where things get really interesting with Mercedes, because the platform you're on matters a lot here. If you have an air suspension car, the W212 E-Class, W222 S-Class, many AMG models, you already have an incredible suspension system. The OEM Plus move is not to rip it out and put coilovers in. That's going backwards. If the air suspension is tired and worn, restore it properly with quality OEM spec components. A worn air suspension on a Mercedes feels terrible. A fresh, properly functioning one is genuinely one of the best suspension setups for a street car in the world. For steel spring cars, your W204 C-Class, W203, older E-Classes, go with quality lowering springs matched with quality dampers. On Mercedes specifically, Sachs is your friend. Sachs actually supplies OEM dampers for Mercedes from the factory, so Sachs Sport or Sachs Performance dampers paired with H&R or Eibach springs is about as close to an AMG Sport suspension as you can get without buying an AMG. It genuinely feels like it should have come from the factory this way. If you do have the budget for quality coilovers, KW Variant 3, Bilstein B16, Öhlins Road and Track, these are exceptional on Mercedes platforms. The W204 on a set of KW V3s is a genuinely transformative experience. But these are not cheap, and that's kind of the point. Budget coilovers are cutting corners somewhere, and Mercedes suspension geometry is too precise to introduce flex and slop with cheap components. The goal is always the same. The car should feel planted, like it's reading the road and talking to you. Mercedes has a tendency to over-insulate, and a good suspension setup brings back that connection without beating you up over every expansion joint. Mercedes brakes from the factory are honestly quite good, so on an OEM Plus build, the goal here isn't transformation, it's refinement. Better pads and fresh fluid will make an immediately noticeable difference in pedal feel. The stock Mercedes pads are biased toward low dust and quiet operation. Moving to something like Hawk HPS, EBC Yellow Stuff, or Ferodo DS2500 gives you a firmer, more progressive pedal and better bite without the downsides of race pads. And I want to be clear about race pads on a street Mercedes. Just don't. Race pads need to reach operating temperature before they perform properly. On a street car, you're almost never hitting those temps. What you'll get instead is reduced cold stopping power and squealing at every traffic light. Your neighbors will hate you, and your car will actually stop worse than stock. It's a bad trade. Brake fluid is an easy win. Upgrade to a quality fluid with a higher boiling point. ATE Super Blue or Motul RBF 600 are solid choices. On a heavy Mercedes being driven hard on a back road, good fluid prevents the spongy pedal that comes from heat-related fade. And it's one of the cheapest upgrades on this entire list. Stainless steel braided lines are a meaningful upgrade if your rubber lines are old. They reduce hose expansion under pressure, which translates to a firmer, more consistent pedal feel. On an older W203 or W210 with tired rubber lines, the difference is actually quite dramatic. Now, engine and breathing. The factory airbox on most modern Mercedes is actually well designed, so where the real gains are is in the tune, not necessarily in dramatic intake hardware changes. On older cars like the M112 V6 or the supercharged M111 engines, there are legitimate cold air intake improvements to be made. But do your research on your specific engine, because a bad intake setup can actually hurt power by disrupting airflow. Exhaust is where things get fun, and I'll say the same thing I'd say about any car. Keep the resonator. Delete your Mercedes resonator and you will not get a throaty AMG rumble. You'll get a raspy, droning sound that fills the cabin and makes every long drive miserable. The resonator shapes the exhaust note, it doesn't suppress it. What you want is a quality catback exhaust that keeps the resonator, uses mandrel-bent stainless piping, and opens up the tips to something that suits the car. On a W205 C-Class with the AMG line body kit, the diffuser already has large exhaust cutouts. Fitting an exhaust that fills those openings transforms the rear end visually and sonically. It looks purposeful rather than like an afterthought. The real gains on any modern turbocharged Mercedes come from ECU tuning. The M274, M276, M177, M178 engines, basically everything turbocharged from the last decade, have significant performance left on the table. Not because the engineers didn't know what they were doing, but because they tuned for broad fuel quality, long-term reliability across extreme climates, and multiple emissions markets simultaneously. A quality tune on an M274 2.0T, the engine in the C200, C250, and C300 depending on market, liberates meaningful additional torque right in the mid-range, exactly where you use it on a street car. The throttle response sharpens, the turbo spools more aggressively, the power delivery becomes more linear and immediate. It genuinely feels like a different car. For a daily driven street Mercedes, this is one of the highest value modifications you can make. Just go to a reputable tuner who works specifically with Mercedes platforms. This is not a place to cut corners. Mercedes uses rubber bushings extensively because they're building a luxury car, and rubber absorbs noise and vibration extremely well. And for a street car, this is largely the right choice. But there are specific areas where bushing flex under load creates handling vagueness, and strategic polyurethane replacements can sharpen things considerably. On the W204 C-Class, the rear subframe bushings are a well-known weak point. When they're worn, the rear end becomes vague and imprecise. Quality poly replacements firm things up noticeably. Similarly, the front control arm bushings on older platforms like the W203 and W211 wear over time and introduce geometry changes under load. Replacing them brings back the precision the car had when new. What you don't want to do is replace everything. On a Mercedes, aggressive bushing replacement will introduce harshness and noise that feels completely wrong. Differential bushings, engine mounts on anything other than a smooth inline-6 or V8. Be careful. Know your chassis. Know which bushings are structural and handling critical versus which ones are primarily for comfort, and make decisions accordingly. This is where I think Mercedes OEM Plus builds can really shine, because the interior is already genuinely excellent, and small targeted upgrades make a massive difference. You almost certainly don't need bucket seats. In a Mercedes daily driver, you'll get in and out hundreds of times. You'll do long motorway runs. You'll sit in traffic. Aggressive bolsters will make all of that worse. The AMG Sport seats that come on performance variants are already genuinely excellent. If you don't have them, hunting down a genuine set from a breaker for your platform is one of the best interior upgrades you can make. The steering wheel is a big one on older Mercedes. A genuine AMG Sport steering wheel, or the flat-bottomed AMG Performance wheel for the W204, completely changes how the car feels. It's smaller, it's thicker, it communicates better. And because it's OEM Mercedes, it fits perfectly. The controls all work, and it looks completely factory. That is exactly the spirit of OEM Plus. And then the small things. Squeaks, rattles, creaking plastics. These will absolutely kill the experience of your car. A Mercedes with a rattling dashboard doesn't feel like a Mercedes anymore. Track them down. Felt strips, foam tape, small shims. These cost almost nothing, and the difference is enormous. I fixed a single dashboard vent rattle, and the car immediately felt like a much more expensive thing to be in. It sounds ridiculous, but it's completely true. One last thing, and I think it's one of the most underrated parts of building a Mercedes. Retrofitting factory options from higher spec cars. Mercedes has an incredible parts ecosystem and carryover components across model lines. Heated seats, adaptive headlights, ambient lighting, memory seats. So much is interchangeable within a generation. And because it's all factory Mercedes, it looks completely factory when it's done. Coding it in with the right software, or a Mercedes specialist who knows the platform, opens up a whole world of factory quality upgrades at a fraction of new prices. That is OEM Plus in its purest form. So whether you're working with a W203, a W204, a W212, a C180, or a C63, the philosophy is the same. Build on what the engineers gave you. Remove the compromises made for mass appeal. Finish the car into what it should have been if it was designed specifically for someone like you. You don't need the most extreme build. You just need to ask, what is this car trying to be? And how do I help it get there? That's OEM Plus. That's the goal. Drop a comment below with what you're building. I'd love to know what platform you're on and what direction you're taking it. And if this gave you some ideas, a subscription genuinely helps this channel keep going. See you in the next one.